Colombia, the 45th massacre so far in 2022 was recorded, according to information from the Institute of Studies for Development and Peace in the past. In the United States, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg announced that he will meet with senior officials from Turkey, Sweden, and Finland to unblock the Scandinavian nations' entry into the military alliance. Hundreds of Sudanese protesters rallied on Wednesday in the front of the United Nations mission in Khartoum to call for its dismissal. Hi, this is From the South. I am your news anchor, Dio Martin, from the TeleSUR studios in Havana. We begin with the news. Systematic violence persists in Colombia. The Institute for Studies for Development and Peace in the past registered a new massacre perpetrated in the department of Magdalena. The incident took place in the locality of Tucurinca when a group of armed men entered a house and attacked those present. The victims were identified as José Romero Polo, 42 years old, Brian Castillo Polo, 24 years old, and Andrés Orozco Villa, 22 years old. Another man was found dead 100 meters away from the area where the first incident occurred. According to INDEPA's data, with this event, there are now a total of 45 massacres registered in the country so far in 2022. In Mexico, Hurricane Agatha killed at least 11 people and another 30 were reported missing. Oaxaca State Governor Alejandro Murat said that the storm that began in the Pacific Ocean affected the coasts and the mountain region. Agatha swept the south of the country, leaving close to 40,000 people without electricity. Agatha, now a tropical storm, made landfall in the south of Mexico Monday afternoon with hurricane winds and advanced on Tuesday towards the highlands, becoming a tropical depression but with intense storms that caused landslides and flooding. And the Nicaraguan government authorized the Ministry of Finance and Public Credit to approve the disbursement of over $382 million to finance the 10th program of expansion and improvement of roads in 9 municipalities of the country. The program includes the expansion and upgrading of 4 road sections that will improve quality of life for more than 534,000 Nicaraguans. The initiative seeks to contribute to the socio-economic development of the country and improve accessibility for the Pacific, the Central, and the Southern Caribbean coast regions. Now, Peru's court will have to rule on the legality of congressional acts after new protection actions violations over the due process in the election of the public defender, among other cases. The action against the election of the public defender alleges noncompliance with the law, which establishes a maximum of 9 members of the Electoral Commission. The Office of the Public Defender's Union, in its capacity as plaintiff, filed at the same time a precautionary measure so that the election can be made without the effect until the merits of the protection appeal are resolved. Trade unions in Montevideo's docks in Uruguay resumed negotiations with the Ministry of Labor in order to find a solution to the conflict generated by the dismissal of workers belonging to Montecon's operator. In addition to the Ministry of Labor and the mentioned dock workers' union, Social Security and companies operating in the port also participated in the negotiations. The conflict was generated by the layoff of 150 employees of the company Montecon. This happened after the government granted the exclusive use of the maritime terminal to the Belgian company Cato and Natye until 2081. To solve the situation, the executive proposes to create a special unemployment insurance that is equivalent to 70% of the worker's salary. The initiative will benefit at least 100 of the dismissed citizens. Authorities have also promised to offer jobs to those affected. In the United States, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg announced that he will meet with senior officials from Turkey, Sweden, and Finland to unblock the accession of the Scandinavian nations to the military alliance. At a press conference in Washington where he met with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Stoltenberg confirmed that he will call a meeting to ensure that the accession of Stockholm and Helsinki to NATO moves forward. The entry of Finland and Sweden requires unanimity by the 30 member states of the military bloc. So far, Turkey opposes to this initiative. Stoltenberg said he hopes to make progress before NATO Leaders Summit that will be held in Madrid at the end of June to define the organization's roadmap for the coming years. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that the decision to continue delivering weapons to Ukraine is part of a plan to force Russia to the negotiation table.
The Secretary General said that's by definition what wars are, and I'll just repeat what I said. As long as this goes on, we want to make sure that Ukraine has in hand what it needs to defend itself, and we want to make sure that Russia is feeling strong pressure from as many countries as possible to end the aggression. That's the best way, we think, to bring the aggression to a close as soon as possible, to end the war, to get to diplomacy, and to stop the suffering.
As of today, TeleSUR will expand its signal with new satellite parameters since more than ever the world connects to us and our stories are being heard in other further away nations. These parameters will be in place on June the 1st in Latin America and the Caribbean, both in English and in Spanish, and quite soon further changes will be implemented for the signals in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. This new platform will continue providing truthful content to oppose the hegemonic media's narrative and our faithfulness to our audience. We're going to take a short break now. Please join us again after this. Hi and welcome back to From the South. The Russian government warned about the negative impact on the global energy market of the European Union's sanctions against the Eurasian giant's oil. The Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that the oil embargo against Russia will affect not only Europe but also the entire world. These statements come after the European Union announced new sanctions against Russian oil and the exclusion of the Russian bank Sberbank from the SWIFT financial communication system, as well as the banning of 3 Russian state television channels. Peskov also reiterated that Moscow is making efforts to redirect its exports of energy products and minimize the negative consequences of the sanctions imposed by Europe. Gazprom completely suspended gas supplies to 2 operators in Germany and Denmark after the deadline for payment in rubles. The 2 operators who will suffer the suspension of gas supplies are Shell Energy in Germany and Ørsted in Denmark. According to Russian authorities, both companies were informed in time that payments for gas supplied from the 1st of April had to be made in rubles in the framework of the new requirements implemented by Moscow in the face of foreign sanctions. These companies refused to make such payments. A similar measure, and for the same reasons, also began to be applied on Tuesday, May 31st, to the company Gasterra from the Netherlands. An explosion in Russia caused by a gas leak in a residential building in the city of Mytishi, northeast of Moscow, killed at least 1 person and injured 2. The prosecutor's office in Moscow reported that the blast occurred on the 3rd floor of a 5-story building. An emergency team is on the scene carrying out the evacuation and inspection of the premises. The victims' identities are still being processed. The injured were taken to hospitals where they are receiving proper care. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov visited Saudi Arabia on Wednesday, where he met foreign ministers from Gulf Cooperation Council states. The Russian diplomat, who was in Bahrain Tuesday, met with ministers from Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Oman, Kuwait, Qatar, and Bahrain in the Gulf Cooperation Council headquarters in Riyadh. As part of his visit, Lavrov also met his Saudi counterpart, Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud, and both men praised the level of cooperation from within the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. The comments were issued amid Western media reports that some members of OPEC and their allies were considering removing Russia from the group. During a visit to Saudi Arabia, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Ukraine's requests for weapons supplies are a direct provocation aimed at drawing the West into hostilities.
This is the direct provocation aimed at drawing the West into hostilities. Serious countries in the European Union, of course, are well aware of the unacceptability of such scenarios. It also seems that we recently heard signs of reasonable assessment from Washington.
The oil embargo by the European Union aimed at punishing Russia for its special military operation in Ukraine is putting one of Italy's largest refineries at risk, and that would be a terrible blow for the economy of an already depressed region. The refinery, owned by Russia's Lukoil, is located in Priolo, Sicily, and it employs 3,500 people at 3 production sites, including a refinery and gasification plant and an electricity cogenerating plant in the Sicilian province of Syracuse. The plant and its branch industries generate half of the provincial GDP and 8% of the region's. It processes 1/5 of Italy's crude oil imports. Because of the embargo, refinery workers are increasingly concerned about their future.
Of course, we are worried about our jobs, and also because if Lukoil disappears, there are other industries connected to it. There will be a domino effect, that is, the collapse of the whole system, which involves other companies in the chemical sector, the port, and all the interconnected companies. We're talking about 10,000 jobs, representing 50% of the gross domestic production of this province.
Pope Francis showed his concern about global wheat supplies as he called for unblocking wheat exports from Ukraine. During the Mass he led in St. Peter's Square, the Supreme Pontiff reiterated his concern about the blockade of wheat exports from Ukraine. He also called for everything possible to be done to resolve this issue and to guarantee the universal human right to food in the context of rising grain prices due to the conflict in Ukraine. The head of the Catholic Church also called on the several actors in the conflict not to use the supply of wheat as a weapon of war.
The blockade of wheat exports from Ukraine, on which the lives of millions of people depend, especially those in the poorest countries, is very worrying. I urge that every effort be made to resolve this issue and to guarantee the universal human right to food. Please don't use wheat, a staple food, as a weapon of war.
We have more news coming up after a final short break. Please stay with us. Hello and welcome back. Hundreds of Sudanese protesters rallied on Wednesday in front of the United Nations mission in Khartoum to call for its dismissal. The protests criticized efforts by UN envoy Volker Perthes to resolve the political crisis in the country since last year's military coup. The rallies came as the United Nations Security Council reflected on extending the mission's mandate beyond June 3rd. Demonstrators accused Volker of interfering in Sudan's internal affairs. Sudan has been rocked by a deepening unrest since a 2019 coup sparked irregular protests across much of the country. The power grab derailed a fragile power-sharing agreement between the army and civilians negotiated after the oust of Omar al-Bashir. Violent crackdown on the demonstrations has left nearly 100 people killed.
Volker must leave today, before tomorrow. If he doesn't, we will make him leave by force. We will not plead, write reports or speeches to the United Nations. It will be by force, by direct force. Volker came to involve forces of freedom and change back in the Sudanese society. The Sudanese society is against these parties. These people work for their own benefit, and their work involves exclusion and vengeance. We will not stop and we will not calm down until the problems in Sudan are resolved by the Sudanese.
The Palestinian Health Ministry reported on Wednesday morning a Palestinian female journalist was gunned down by Israeli forces at the entrance to the Al Arub refugee camp north of Hebron. According to the statement issued by the Palestinian Health Authority, Gofran Wazazna, aged 31, died from a series of live bullet hits to her chest. For its part, the Red Crescent said Israeli forces prevented medics from approaching her for 20 minutes. The young Palestinian woman who was killed was a resident of the nearby village of Al-Shuyuk. She had recently spent 3 months in Israeli prisons and had been released in early April 2022. She had a degree in media from the Hebron University and worked as a journalist. Also on May 11th, Israeli forces shot and killed veteran Palestinian reporter Shirin Abu Akleh while covering Israeli violent acts in the West Bank. And despite the threat of inflation, the Portuguese economy is on the right track with historically low unemployment and high growth. Its economy is benefiting in particular from a strong uptake in tourism as the industry continues to reopen in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic.
2 years of hardship. Well, it's really nice. Frankly, it feels good. Plus, the weather is nice. Everyone's together. There is no stress. It's really lovely.
The demand is very strong. For this summer. If nothing unexpected happens, we're practically full until September. And the demand is stronger than was expected. We have a really full summer and the prospects are exciting.
We are very close to the occupancy level of the pre-pandemic era. That is a fact, and we want to believe that it will be possible to exceed the pre-pandemic numbers, if all goes well and if the increase in demand continues.
Libyan authorities confirmed Wednesday that a pipeline rupture is spewing thousands of barrels of oil into the desert as workers fight to seal off the leak. The damage to a land pipeline linking the Sarid oil field to the Tobruk terminal on the Mediterranean was the latest blow to the country's struggling oil industry as renewed tensions again divide the North African nation. The Arabian Gulf Oil Company estimated that 22,000 barrels a day were being lost from the leak and said efforts to stop it are still underway. The company blamed the lack of pipeline maintenance as the cause for the leakage. Libya's prized light crude has long featured in the North African country's civil war with rival militias and foreign powers jostling for control of Africa's largest oil reserves. On Wednesday morning, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi arrived in the Republic of Vanuatu as part of his tour through 10 South Pacific Island nations. With this visit, China aims at striking agreements to implement 6 new platforms created specifically for the countries in the region to foster development and tackle poverty, climate change, disaster preparedness and mitigation, agricultural and technological cooperation. Now an independent nation, Vanuatu was a Franco-British condominium. At the present, it has a population of 266,000 inhabitants and a land area of a little over 12,000 square kilometers. Before arriving in Vanuatu, Wang had visited the island of Tonga, where he signed a series of agreements with King Topu VI. With that, we've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at TeleSUR English. You can also join us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Dio Martin. Thank you for watching.
¿Qué tal?